I have something really important to talk about, and it's the RWBY community. While I've already spoken about the fandom in a previous video, I'm afraid that the community is simply getting worse, to a scary degree. I don't like bullies, and I don't want to sit idly by and watch bullying happen without speaking up about it. The toxicity within the fandom is frankly getting out of control, and I wanted to truly start improving as a community already. And so I've gathered a collection of other RWBYtubers to join me in discussing this topic today, because if we want to confront the community to quote-unquote fix the community, then we have to do it as a community. We'll be hearing from them as we continue throughout this video, but first, I apparently have to prove that I'm a real fan. I have made over 130 pieces of fan art for this show, including an unfinished Team Stark fan comic. I own the first 4 volumes on DVD/Blu-ray. I have the Yang, Weiss, Ren, and Pyrrha figures. I own 3 of its soundtracks, 2 physical, 1 digital. I've spent 33 total hours talking about the show collectively in videos, and that's just what got recorded. 2 to 3 years ago, my sister, my roommate, and I would drink coffee together every morning for a couple of hours, and almost every single day the topic of our conversation would be RWBY. I care about this property. And it's boggling that I have to show all these receipts to properly prove that I'm not just some rando who doesn't care about the show, because whenever you voice a negative opinion about it, that's what happens. People tell you that your opinion doesn't matter. You're just a hater. Let the real fans enjoy the show. I am a fan. I wouldn't have spent so much money on its merch otherwise. I wouldn't have spent so much time making videos about it otherwise. And I am not the only person like this.
I remember a few days ago, somebody asked me if I thought there was more toxicity produced by the fandom side or the critic side of the RWBY fandom. Ignoring the fact that I don't think that there are sides at all, like other fandoms that I'm in haven't divided themselves to the extent that RWBY fans do, I think that the answer to this question, whatever it may be, is not really constructive at all. Even though I don't think that this was this person's intention, this question, I feel like, is a trap. It's a weapon for the other side to feel absolved and justified in their toxicity while demonizing the other. People use these arguments to say, well, if X side really produces more toxicity, we're in the right, even if we're a little bit toxic back. So after 4 years of being in the community, I've really come to the conclusion that it doesn't matter who produces more toxicity. Hunter and I have always been in the position where we're too positive for the critics to even consider our discussions or analysis worthy of any attention or a look, but seemingly also too critical other times for fans unfamiliar with us to even give us a chance in general. We've gotten comments calling us shills, calling us sheep, that we support the show blindly, while also simultaneously getting comments if we're turning into the next Vex viewer because we're creating a video that focuses more on us criticizing aspects of the show. And I think the reason for this is because the fandom has a parasocial relationship problem that other fandoms really don't. Like, take something like Kingdom Hearts, for example. Critics don't have a personal connection to Tetsuya Nomura. Like, he's not an influencer or any sort of personality. Like, he's a writer. So I feel like a lot of criticism really stays in the realm of his professional work. And equally, fans of Kingdom Hearts probably don't feel a personal connection to him as an individual and feel less of an urge to defend him. They feel less of an instinct to defend their friend from being attacked. And no one is banking on Nomura from seeing whatever's written about him anyway, be it positive or negative, and so there's that aspect to consider as well. I think the reason why RWBY fans have gotten so divided is because everything is so parasocial and personal. The crew are influencers and entertainers, and fans that like them will feel as though their friend is being attacked, whereas critics who dislike them on a personal level, not necessarily a professional one, will let that bias their criticism as well. It feels like that every criticism or defense is just an emotionally charged personal attack to either protect people that our brains consider friends, or for others to attack people that they consider as like personally irritating, that they're annoying or that they hate them, despite not really knowing them at all. To put it more simply, I guess, is that Miles, for example, is an on-screen entertainer as well as he is the writer of the show. A lot of people may find Miles annoying, let's just say, right? And so they take that personal bias and let it bias their criticism. On the other hand, some people love Miles from his entertaining standpoint. They feel a personal connection with him as their friend, and so they go out of their way to attack anyone that even brings up the slightest criticism against Miles, even if they're not being rude. And I feel like especially what fans don't understand is even if they think that they're defending RWBY, none of this really helps RWBY or the reputation of the show at all. Some people may know I keep 2 jars for marbles that represent positive and negative comments over this year. Like, it helps me remember that the positivity outweighs the negativity, even if I remember the negative interactions more. But I don't remember if those marbles were a critic or a fan. Or another analogy, if this community is a beach divided by, I don't know, a volleyball net or something like that, and people are littering on both sides, like, does it really matter who's littering more or who started it? Because the other side littered more isn't a good argument for destroying the beach and the experience of the beachgoers. And when the beach begins to gain a poor reputation, a reputation for being filled with toxic waste, pointing the finger at each other isn't really gonna help clean up the mess. Saying the critics litter more, or the fans litter more because there are more of them, doesn't change the fact that there is litter everywhere and nobody is cleaning it up. From my perspective, we are all responsible for taking care of the beach. If we still want to use it and be part of it, or want others like artists, fanfic writers, and content creators to bring their fun things to the beach for us to share, we all need to make sure that we're taking care of it. Like, you can't expect people to do the labor of entertaining you or informing you about something, like bringing knowledge, especially when we do talk about like writing and redesigns and criticism, but simultaneously not give them a clear area of the beach to stay in, right? Like, you can't expect somebody to bring, like, I don't know, to bring their like floaties over to the beach, you know, one of those giant tubes. You can't expect them to keep bringing their tube to the beach for everybody to use if their space is being filled by all of this garbage. And I know as a YouTuber, I've had to do a lot of moderating, like my comment section, my Discord. Sometimes people are acting up in my mentions, like they're like, oh, you know, Vex is like this, and I have to be like, don't say that, or I'm gonna block you, or I'm gonna ban you. But a lot of people may be wondering, like, if you're not in a position where you're a moderator, you're not a YouTuber that can moderate the comment section and make sure to take out, like, you know, people getting into arguments and stuff like that, like, what do you do? I remember in my final year of university this year, I learned from my professor that Twitter basically, like, tricks your brain into wanting discourse. Like, it basically gives you, or tries to give you, like, dopamine for dumping on people. And so I think that disengaging in that sort of behavior is the first step, like realizing that some of these platforms are created to make you into a worse person. And I feel like disengaging with that is important. Like, even if other people can't stop littering, you don't need to join in by like throwing an empty can at them, you know what I'm saying? What we can do is appeal to the people that aren't really bad people. Like, Twitter's just rotting their brain. And I know that sounds like kind of like, oh, but you're blaming like Twitter for how people act, but seriously, there was a internet analysis video, I think they used to be called Psych IRL, and they basically did kind of like an experiment where they responded to hate comments hatefully, or they responded to hate comments like politely, basically. Like, say somebody was like, this video shit, like, why did you keep it up? They would respond, I'm sorry you feel that way, can you tell me more? And some people may see that as like passive aggressive, but genuinely, like, her approach worked, where people were like, I'm so sorry, I don't know why I said that, I didn't know that you would see it, right? Like, people on the internet sometimes just kind of go in like autopilot, and then they realize when somebody actually like says to them like, oh, hey, you know, like, that isn't really nice, why did you say that? They're like, oh, I don't know why I said that, right? And so I feel like that, yes, we have to block the bad actors so they don't have any reach in our space, but other people genuinely just get wrapped up in trying to defend their side so hard and feeling like they're kind of like the hero of that story. So I think by like calling each other out like politely, if you feel comfortable, right, being like, hey, so-and-so, like, if you're, you know, if you're friends or something, hey, so-and-so, like, why did you say that about, you know, this person, or why did you say that about this? Like, that's not very cool, that's not very nice. Just trying to open that dialogue, or shake the people we know that are usually reasonable from being unreasonable. I think we need to make more of an effort to support people who have an opposing view to us when they are arguing in good faith, when they are arguing their opposing view in good faith, or they are doing so politely and respectfully. And if people are being hostile or aggressive towards them, I think that it's time to kind of, you know, be that like leadership and try to be like, hey, you know, so-and-so actually said this like very politely and respectfully, like, why are you jumping on them like that? I think even in my experience, like something as quick as like, hey, like so-and-so is my colleague, like let's just say Critter, right? Like, hey, you know, Critter is my colleague, you shouldn't talk about them like that. Like that can quickly make people realize they went too far and the dispute tends to be resolved. I find that even on Twitter where it's not like a YouTube comment section, if I'm like, hey, if you keep saying stuff like this is like really toxic and aggressive, I'm gonna block you. That's enough to get a response like, I'm sorry, Calxiyn, I won't do it again. Like, I think that that's something really easy that we can do, that we can kind of hold each other accountable. And at the end of the day, I think regardless of whether or not you decide to do any of that, if you want people to stick around in whatever space you consider yourself to lean toward more, right? Like a critic or a fan community space. Like whether they're a writer, an artist, a RWBYtuber, you can show them positive support. You need to reply or comment for the algorithm, you gotta share their video or retweet their art or share their fan fiction. Because I feel like that people, especially people who believe they're defending the show, they're putting all of that energy into fighting with people on Twitter, but imagine if they put their energy into supporting the people who make the content they actually want to see instead. Like if you want positivity in the fan community, the solution isn't arguing with every critic you see on Tumblr or something. It's supporting the people that make positive content so they don't go away. And if you want to see more criticism videos, the solution isn't to try to bully the positive fans out of being positive or positive RWBYtubers out of being positive, but rather support them when they share criticism, because many of us do and people just don't care. Or you can support the people making critical content, right? We are creatures of habit, and if we are defaulting to bad habits, we will never change. And so I feel like that a good thing to do would be, I guess, to be more conscious of our behavior, to write down when we feel like we are going to do a bad habit and then replace it with a good habit until that action becomes more natural. And I feel like that this video was almost like the first step in creating like that sort of atmosphere, right? We're all sharing our experiences, and now I hope that we can support each other more in the future. Like, I know for me personally, I have been like, I need to comment on all of my friends' videos. Like, you know, I'm gonna comment on Vex's video today. I'm gonna comment on, you know, Critter's Persona video today, even though like it's not RWBY, I'm still gonna leave a comment, right? This video could be the first step to like encouraging people, I guess, to seek out more of those beneficial behaviors, the behaviors that will clean up the beach, if you will. So thanks for Twiins for having me. I hope I did okay. I hope this wasn't too long. I'm not really prepared for things like this. I was really scared and nervous, and so I hope that I did okay. I'm really interested in hearing you guys' thoughts, and now I will take you back to Twiins, maybe, or somebody else.
On the topic of sides, the tribalism of this community is one of the worst things it could have done to itself. Hatedom versus fandom, or rude versus apologists. Whatever you use to signify the two sides of fans who only want to hear positive takes about RWBY and fans who find it hard to see any positivity in RWBY, choosing to see yourselves as enemies within a single fandom is just fucking stupid, and I'm sorry to be crass, but it is. This idea that you have an enemy side, when really you all want to like RWBY, you all want to engage with its fandom, you aren't enemies. You just have different opinions. Some people are happy with the show, some people aren't. That's it. You can get along with people you disagree with, you know. I don't always agree with Calxyn's takes, but I'll still chat with her about Kingdom Hearts. I don't always agree with MurderofBirds or Vexed Viewer, but that doesn't mean I feel the need to shut down their voices or that I think they don't deserve respect. Hell, I don't always agree with my own twin sister about the show. Having different opinions doesn't make the other person worthy of derision. Like, I know that I've clashed with other RWBYtubers before, specifically Cal and MurderofBirds on Twitter, and I regret that, and I'm glad that they reached out and we were all able to talk and understand each other. We're all chill now, because yeah, one internet spat isn't representative of a person as a whole. It just goes to show that people you find yourself arguing with at one point can still be a friend if you let yourself listen to their perspective. Also, I gotta say, so many people act like I said Arnold was one of the reasons I made my leaving RWBY video, and I don't understand how you got that. Like, I literally suggest him as an option people would like better than me if they didn't like my negative opinions. Like, I say, go watch him. You have to listen to all the words a person says, you know, not just the ones that push your narrative.
I just wanted to record something for Twinsing's video about the fandom, because it's a topic that I have experience with, being one of, and possibly even the first real negative voice in the fandom, before it was cool, you know. I've dealt with the toxic positivity crowd for years, and one of the most common forms this takes is people who just hate, like, the art or the practice or even the notion of criticizing a piece of media that they like. Of course, that's an important part of it. When it comes to something they don't like, a critical video essay, for example, they'll criticize the hell out of it without a single ounce of self-awareness. Hi, Fat Man from the future here. I just stopped by to let you know that you can pause to read any of these comments that you want because they're not going to be on screen long enough to read comfortably at the rate I'm showing them. But you don't have to, because a lot of what these people will do is just hit you with an avalanche of text. It's called a gish gallop. It's a classic time-wasting technique popular amongst angry people. There's only one comment in here I think is specifically worth reading, and I point out which one it is while it's on screen. And you're going to see a lot of comments from the same users over and over again, and that's usually because they're the quintessential representation of a prevailing attitude in the fandom, or they're just the funny ones. Anyway, back to editing, bye! You can put hours or months of work into a review, and you'll have people in the comments making excuses for the show. Bad excuses, like nothing's perfect. As if things only exist in two categories. Perfect, which is unattainable, and imperfect, which is not worth examining at all. It's such an insidious mindset to have. Hey guys, you clicked on the review to basically say don't engage with art at all. I've solved it, and the answer is no. I'm aware that it's a petty thing to be hung up on after hearing it a million times, but it has more staying power than the myriad of people who say you can't criticize something for other reasons. It's a passion project. All criticism is insulting. It's low budget, even when it's not. Or that replacing 2 incompetent writers with 1 competent one would actually save budget. Its popularity invalidates your criticism. Only positive criticism is constructive. It isn't over! As if you can't criticize a part of something. Or as if a feature-length movie or full season of a show shouldn't hold together under scrutiny. Just straight up saying it doesn't have any problems? That happens a lot. Or the big one, how Monty died. That's a tool they feel no shame in wielding against people who watched the show that he made. And as much as I hate man die means thing good being used to deflect criticism, it isn't nearly as bad as the people on the hate-dem side throwing around Monty's vision as if that was a thing. If you are actually invested in criticizing the show from a creative or even a production standpoint, you should know that he really just did his own thing the whole time. He would add characters and full fight scenes and entire plot devices on a whim. An anime homework? What does that even mean? And if you had seen Haloid, you'd know that Yuri ships are totally in his wheelhouse. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the large and terrible portion of the fandom that just hate criticism. After 7 years of this, all of the really boring, repetitive hate comments just fade into the background, and only the really funny ones stand out to me. I know this might sound like, oh, toughen up or have a thick skin or whatever, but that's not what I'm saying. Some of these are legitimately hilarious and funny enough to make putting up with the constant barrage of it completely worth it. Like this guy. Don't pause to read this comment, it sucks. But he left it after watching less than 3 minutes of my Volume 1 review, and then 90 replies later went on Facebook to write an epic poem about how God wanted to be his friend because of how he murdered me. You should pause the video to read this comment because it slaps. Or Night of Chaos, my most favoritist troll ever, who left an unhinged rant about how something being popular makes it objectively good, and who can't tell me and Raymond apart, even though he's citing mutually exclusive physical characteristics of us. And he thinks that Gurren Lagann has twice as many flaws as RWBY. Or even this guy, who censored the word ass in his threat of physical violence towards me. A lot of these hate comments are from, sad people. And I hardly get haters like this anymore, because nowadays it's far more popular to conflate criticism with everything that's wrong and bad about the world in order to pretend they have a moral high ground. And to me, these people are more problematic because two dumbasses having an internet slap fight over their opinion of a cartoon is impossible to take seriously. But someone who presents the air of an upstanding citizen battling homophobia and bigotry by, being mean to a guy who doesn't like that RWBY has so many plot holes will get a bunch more sympathy points from people who aren't paying attention, which is everyone, because it's a review of a cartoon that is impossible to take seriously. So they can just lie and conflate bigotry with a review, and people will accept it because it's easy, I suppose. Engaging with this at all is exhausting because it's a crusade that has collateral damage. I mean, there are a million reasons to hate me, but when someone is blinded by hatred over my imaginary crimes, it extends to my friends. And I won't get into that, because honestly, it sucks. And reminding them that sending death threats to trans people is not media analysis has never ever resulted in anyone going, "Oh damn, you're right, I guess it's not." Because for some of them, it's not about that. They just don't want to hear someone say they don't like a show they do. And hopefully, it's needless to say that writing off a large group of people like that is a bad thing, because actual bigots do engage with the show. Because while I do block those people and tell them to get lost every chance I get, it would be nice to not be lumped in with them. RWBY has a largely female cast. There are gay and trans characters in it, so the people who want to hate it for those reasons, the ones, will consume any content that says thing bad, because especially in RWBY's case, where everything is written poorly, there's a good chance that those aspects will draw criticism, and they can go and get their little Nazi nut off to me saying that Yang probably shouldn't backslide into a relationship with someone as emotionally negligent as Blake. And then, when those people inevitably find out that I'm not a bigot, I get hate from them too! It really sucks when I see someone who's watched my videos for years reveal that they only ever cared because they thought I hated women. And it also sucks when I point out how Miles can't write a female character and somebody else thinks that means I hate women. Sorry I kinda stopped showing comments on screen. I don't save these ones because they're not funny. I also let the bots filter most of them to spam because YouTube will demonetize your video if your comment section has too many bad words in it. Yeah, it sucks. And since we're talking about all of the problems with the fandom, I should probably mention the people who don't understand fair use. And I just did. Anyway, if you want to hear me say RWBY sucks for a cool reason, like how the script is bad, then you can subscribe to my channel. Because I've been working on a Volume 7 video for almost a year, and, you can cut this part if you want. But please don't, I need more subs.
Plenty of people will voice their criticisms of the show just to be labeled a bad guy, hater, fake fan, clout chaser. A fan of a property is capable of not enjoying every element of that property. I love the Banjo-Kazooie games, but I hate the Grunty Industries level. I adore the Lord of the Rings movies, but I feel the Arwen being connected to the Ring plotline was useless. I'm still a fan of Banjo-Kazooie and Lord of the Rings, despite being able to recognize that these products have flaws. The fandom is so weirdly eager to try and shut down opinions they don't like. People get told to kill themselves for liking the wrong ship. They get doxxed for liking the wrong characters. A single negative review puts you into the hate-dom. Someone to be ignored and belittled. Someone who deserves to be attacked in the name of defending a cartoon. So often members of the fandom preach that they are fighting back against bigots. Those who would use slurs and who are trying to tear down the show for its progressive elements. And sure, assholes like that will always exist, and they should be blocked and ignored, but the fandom has this habit of labeling anyone who voices a negative opinion as one of those bigots. Amazing how you conquered me. Hi there, I'm the JudgmentalCritter. So, in the midst of all this discussion about the fandom, I wanted to take time to help clarify something. What is critique? Critique or criticism seems to be at the center point of this whole ordeal, and it seems like nowadays there are people who associate the word critic to mean the same thing as hater. I think there's a lot of members of the RWBY fandom that have sort of misinterpreted what critique really is. I've seen a lot of people compare criticism to complaining, and I've seen that a lot of people seem to think that criticism is the root of the issue with the RWBY community. Well, I really don't think it is. I think these misinterpretations of criticism is really what's gotten the fandom in a twist. First, I would like to clarify what is not actual criticism. A few examples. I hate this. I love this character. This episode was boring. This was good. These really are not critiques. What they are opinions, and that's fine, but just because you state an opinion, that doesn't mean it's the same as actually offering real critique. To critique something is to review/analyze a product, explaining what they liked or didn't like. Basically, it's taking those opinions and offering an explanation as to why you feel that way. I've seen that there's this really bad misconception that good critique needs to be objective or free of bias. That's just factually wrong. Critique in every form is entirely subjective. You cannot accurately review something if you try to be unbiased. I once had someone ask me on Twitter, how can I tell if someone's critique is wrong? Well, that's the thing. There is no wrong critique. Since it's bound to your own thoughts and opinions, that means critique in it of itself is an entirely subjective topic. So if someone says Bumblebee was rushed, and a different person says Bumblebee played out perfectly, there's no wrong answer here. And as long as they offer valid points to help explain their reasoning, neither critique is bad compared to the other. It's then up to you, the individual, to take what you hear from these critiques and compare it to your own thoughts and opinions. Critique is not meant to change your mind about something. Critique is only meant to offer insight on someone's takeaway of a product. And yeah, you're allowed to disagree with them, but that doesn't mean you're allowed to attack someone over it. Just because you have different thoughts on something, that doesn't mean you should try to vilify someone who expresses their own thoughts. If someone already wasn't happy with a product, yelling at them and throwing insults sure isn't going to make them change their minds about it anytime soon. Another thing is, not everybody is going to agree that the same things deserve certain criticisms. Like, I got a comment on my review for the last episode of Volume 8. It was something along the lines of, really? You're complaining about the order people fell now? That's a stretch. Well, yeah. I personally had issues with the order the characters fell. I thought it was something worth talking about. You're always more than allowed to disagree with me or any other critic, but it's not fair to try to discredit what they're saying just because it wasn't something you had issue with. Now, another important misconception I've seen a lot when it comes to critique is this idea that criticism needs to follow a certain etiquette. I get the feeling a lot of people have taken what Miles have said to heart.
It's like a criticism or something, and you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's a fair critique, but you don't want to listen to them because of the way they said it.
Now, I don't entirely disagree with Miles here. If you act like a total piece of shit, people will be more likely to dismiss you. However, there's a bad habit with the RWBY fandom that seems to think any sort of slightly critical tone is too mean. It definitely seems like the only reviews that get praise are the ones that are saccharine sweet. Only nice things to say, only kind tones, and constant praise. That's because people have been claiming the mean ones, or the ones who don't like something about the show, are just hate. No! Because believe it or not, when people are disappointed in a product, they're not always going to be super sweet and nice about it in their review. And there is no rule that criticism needs to be a certain arbitrary degrees of nice. I can say, Adam was a boring character. Or I could say, Adam was a stupid fucking waste of time. Yeah, like Miles says, it might be harder for someone to listen to my input based on my harsher tone, but that doesn't invalidate my critique though. And that definitely doesn't mean it's okay for people to try to attack me over it. This idea that only good critics are nice is laughable, because you want to know who's one of the best critics in the world? One of the most renowned critics who is constantly looked up to and praised for their work, and yet simultaneously is one of the harshest critics you could ever find?
That's bullshit. This was cleaned a week ago.
It tastes shit. Service and standards are far more important than some fucking bimbo.
I don't fix your fucking mess. No, I don't.
Homemade mozzarella is ghastly, stone cold, solid, and tasteless.
Darren, are you fucking kidding me?
A plank of cedar.
I think you're a plank.
You just sat there staring at me like some big muscle-head meatball.
Right, well, I'll get you more pumpkin. I'll ram it right up your fucking ass. Would you like it whole or diced? You're charging fucking money for that! If I tell you to get out there, I don't give a fuck if you got a thong up your fat crack. Get out there!
Yeah, I don't see anyone pitching a fit that Gordon Ramsay needs to be nicer with his wording. This sort of double standard only seems to exist in the RWBY fandom. If you don't want to be covered in a shitstorm of hate, you have to be as nice as possible. Which brings me to my final point. Critique versus hate. These two words do not mean the same thing, and yet so many people in the fandom act like they do. I can't believe I have to actually point this out, but guys, critique is also talking about the positives. So many people seem to think others critique the show because they hate it. No, that's wrong. I've seen people claim that critics hate watch the show so they can attack the fandom. No! That's astoundingly dumb. Like, picture the worst show you've ever seen. Like, you literally hate it with a passion. Now imagine watching that for 9 years just to, what, piss off people online? No, no one does that. That's ridiculous. People can watch RWBY and have disappointments with it, even long-running disappointments that stretch across the whole show, but that's not the same as hate watching. Like, believe it or not, people can voice their criticisms over a show and still love it at the same time. That's really not that hard to do. I've also seen this thing where people claim critics are making up lies to complain about. Like, what? I really did like how Ironwood's character went in Volume 8, but instead I'm gonna lie and say I didn't. People seem to think that if they keep egging the critics on, they'll eventually admit to lying about their entire critique. Is it really that hard to comprehend the idea that people didn't like something you loved? We can't all agree with everything all the time. I don't like tomatoes, but lots of other people do. Is it truly that hard to understand? Do you think I'm lying about liking tomatoes just for attention or something? You know, the people who claim YouTubers make up lies for views greatly overestimates how much money we make off of these videos. And from what I can tell, it's a really big hot button issue when it comes to things that pertain to more sensitive topics. To bring back my example from earlier, Bumblebee. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people be called homophobic just because they don't like Blake X Yang. That is some of the most disgusting behavior I have ever seen from any fandom, and it's so rampant in the RWBY community. People seem desperate to label others as these awful things over simply not liking something. Critics get called homophobic, fascist, misogynistic, racist, bootlicking, bad faith actors, and every single terrible thing you could think of just because someone didn't like their opinions over a cartoon. The fandom needs to stop jumping to these hurtful, accusatory trigger words just to try and discredit someone's critique. The more people throw these words around unnecessarily, the harder it will be to take them seriously when there is someone spreading hate like that. Don't attack someone over a critique you don't like. And the more people who do this sort of thing, the more it'll paint the RWBY community as this stereotype of being sensitive, hurtful, and unwilling to hear any sort of criticism about their show. Critiques are learning tools. They try to teach others what mistakes to avoid, how to succeed, and give their own personal insight into the topics. But I want to make this loud and clear. Just because it's something you don't like, that doesn't mean it's the same as hate. Being critical, expressing disappointments and frustrations are not hate. So stop acting like these ideas are one and the same. It's only causing more harm than good. People are scared to share their opinions about the show because of how the fandom treats people. Here's an idea. If it's not okay for someone to say something towards the creators, then it's also not okay for you to say that same thing about other people in the community. You can't bully someone into liking the show. You can't bully someone into being unhappy with it. If you want to have a real discussion about your differences, then you have to acknowledge that you aren't trying to win. Your goal shouldn't be to turn others to your side. It should be to understand where they're coming from.
Hi there, I'm Raymond McNeil of Celtic Phoenix Productions. I run the Fixing RWBY web series, which is a critical reconstruction of RWBY as a show. And as a consequence, you can imagine, I've received quite a bit of toxicity from actually both sides of the fandom. You know, both the traditional fandom and the hate-dom, as people love to call them, the people that are critical of the show. Which I guess more frequently I'm lumped in with, but I don't consider myself a part of because I genuinely love the show. I don't spite it. There's a lot of things about it that I hate, but I don't want to digress into a whole diatribe on the fine nuances of all that. But the point I'm trying to say is, I have experience from both angles. People say I don't change the show enough. People say I change the show too much. And it's always that weird teetering balance back and forth between the two, where sometimes you get completely conflicting views on the exact same scene. And most of the time, in my experience, a lot of these criticisms are to some degree valid. I can definitely understand where these people are coming from, and they're saying it in a kind and caring way. Toxicity in the fandom is not a problem with the majority of the fandom. I would say 95% of my interactions in the fandom have been very genial. It's just the 5% that I've run into that hasn't been very genial. Very often, I want to kind of give my thought processes on how, not just that this is a thing that exists, because I think that's just kind of pointless. Everyone knows in every fandom, toxicity exists. And toxicity exists on the internet in general, in reality in general. These things exist. We all know it, we all accept it, we all deal with it every single day. What I think I want to contribute to this video is just my method for handling it. And it's a very simple two-step process. Be kind is the first step. Be kind always. When you open up a conversation, when you open up a line of dialogue, say, for example, someone posts a video of post one of my fixings up on the Reddit, because you can't post your own content up on the Reddit because that rule is so... I don't understand Reddit. Anyway, someone posts a video of me up on the Reddit, and a comment is lodged beneath saying how much they hate the decisions I've made, how much they despise me as a creator, how much they hate the work that I've done. And maybe in there's actually some critiques that I actually want to respond to, that I'm like, oh, either I can defend this point, or maybe I can admit that I did something wrong. I'll sit down and I'll read it, and it's painful to read because reading hateful slurs about, reading hateful speech about you, I don't really get slurs. Reading hateful speech about you is always painful. But then when you respond, and this is very important, be kind. Don't give in to the need to lash back at these people. Don't give in to their hate with hate, because that just fuels more hate. That's how that works. There's a time and place for everything, and hate in an open forum seems kind of pointless. So you open with kindness. You try to disagree genially, or you try to agree genially. You try to be as kind as possible in your responses to them. And then their response makes all the difference. And this is where step 2 comes in. When they respond to you, if they respond to you, if they are kind, if they are genial, if they are suddenly retracting that, and that's typically my experience. For that remaining 5% that I mentioned of the toxic fan base, that goes down to like 1%. Typically, the last 4% are just angry people that want to kind of vent a little bit, and once you approach them with kindness, they realize you're a human being, and they start talking to you like one. They start treating you like one, and you start having a productive conversation. So that's the first step. Already negates another 80% of the toxic fan base right out the gate. The last 20%, if they're still mean or vile to you, if they're still treating you like crap because of your opinions, stop replying. Just don't reply. They're not there to have a debate with you. They're not there to talk to you about criticism. They're not there to talk to you about the pros or cons of the show. They're there for one of two things. Either they're there just for a fight, or they're there to live or die whatever side they're on. They're not looking for an open debate. They've already made up their minds about you. They've already made up their minds entirely, which is not a healthy mindset. And you should not encourage that. So that's my advice to put out there. That's my advice to put out into the universe. If you're going to interact with anyone online, especially if they're trying to be mean to you, if they're trying to be angry and vehement, always on the first reply be kind. And their reply in turn will determine whether or not they get a second. And that is the only way I can imagine handling it. Now, I should clarify, this is much easier said than done, because I've fallen into the trap where I get angry back because I feel indignant. It can hurt. It hurts to hear criticism of yourself or something you care about or a position you care about. It hurts. And that is where I think the heart of toxicity really lies. People hurting each other and trying to hurt each other back. Know that in the back of your head, and always lodges in the back of your head, words can never hurt you. You give them the power to do so. Take back control of what you read online and don't contribute to the toxicity. That's all I can ask of people. I can't tell you to do that. I can't order you to do that, but I can plead with you. Don't contribute. Be kind, be genial, debate, discuss, and criticize. That's fine. But don't turn to hate as a weapon. It serves no one in the end. I'd like to thank Twiins Inc. for having me on here, as well as thank all the other collaborators that are working on this particular video. I think it's important for the fandom that we RWBYtubers all kind of have a collaborative process to show that even if we disagree on what the quality of the show or on how the show handled certain things or the themes or whatever, critic or fan alike, we can all work together and have a much healthier dialogue about everything else. So I'm grateful to be a part of that. Thank you so much, Twiins Inc. If you guys want to catch me, you can always find me over on Celtic Phoenix Productions. Fixing RWBY Volume 5 should be up by the time this video releases, so go over there and check that out, as well as the rest of the Fixing RWBY series, or any of the reactions over there. But yeah, other than that, thanks for having me on here, and I'll catch you all on the flip side.
I'm not asking you to be BFFs with those who see the show differently than you. I'm just saying you all could do with just being nicer to each other. Stop assuming those you disagree with are all bigots. Stop assuming those you disagree with are all simps. Learn to actually listen to what others say. Don't put words into their mouth. Don't assume they have ulterior motives for what they say. Just listen to people. Actually listen. Just be nominally respectful of differing opinions. Stop saying RT has LGBTQ representation to appease the rabid fans. You're being an asshole. Rooster Teeth's a progressive company. Blake and Yang dating doesn't ruin the show. Stop being a dick. Stop saying Adam fanboys are abuse supporters. You're being an asshole. Adam was a cool character who changed a lot right before his sudden death. People wishing Adam got to do more aren't advocating abuse. Stop being a dick. All of you, stop trying to villainize each other. They're just kids excited about representation. They're just kids disappointed in the use of a character. Oh, and this one's important, because both sides do this. Stop using Monty's name as a weapon to try and win your stupid little arguments.
There's a point where it tips, there's a point where it breaks, there's a point where it
Hey guys, my name is Arnold, also known as MurderofBirds. I am a RWBY content creator. Some of you guys might watch my videos, some of you guys might know of me, especially from previous videos with Twin. But overall, I wanted to be a part of this project to present my own anecdotes, my own personal experience, maybe leave you with words of wisdom here and there about the state of affairs within the RWBY community that really creeps up every few months, if not something that we go through on an annual basis. Whether it's in show with how the course of the show is progressing and people's takeaway, whether it's Adam, Bumblebee, Ironwood's development, or anything like that. And I feel like it happens more so during the off season when there is no RWBY to talk about and people are bored out of their minds and are just striking up arguments or disputes or like us versus them mentalities on social media, which does more harm than good to our community. It's kind of embarrassing to watch from the sidelines, and we all kind of get lost in the sauce, myself included, on not being the best versions of ourselves. All I can really do is present the message of opening up your ears and opening up your heart. I think something that is lost on a lot of people when they get caught up in their own opinions, conveying their opinions, and listening or taking in the opinions of others is a lack of compassion, a lack of respect. I feel like passion is not the right word to describe the people who kind of throw any type of respect to the wayside when it comes to insulting others, being overly toxic, overly aggressive in their stance when it comes to X characters, good or bad, writing is good or bad, the show is never going to get better, and things of that nature. And from someone in my position, in my perspective, I even get shit for enjoying the show. I have been told that liking RWBY is akin to why the show will never get better, because someone in my position, someone who has the influence in the community that people see that as, well, the show is kind of made with people like him in mind. So if I enjoy RWBY, then screw the millions of people that enjoy it, as long as Murder of Birds is enjoying it. And it's been a constant struggle for me that I've dealt with ever since like Volume 4, Volume 5, that really has honestly kind of changed my relationship with the community versus when I first got into it to where I am now. I don't know, I'm in a constant war with how I am just I'm unapologetically passionate, enthusiastic, and I love this show to death. I don't think I will ever be convinced that this show isn't worth my time, my energy, my money, my investment. And I think that bothers a lot of people. And from my perspective of watching RWBY, it was never a problem that I enjoyed the show when majority of other people enjoyed the show, right? Volumes 1, Volume 2, Volume 3 are pretty much like the untouched volumes. Like, everyone can like those volumes. That's fine and dandy. It only started becoming an issue for me personally and I started getting like a lot of hostility thrown my way when Volumes 4, Volumes 5 started coming in, and people that once enjoyed RWBY were no longer enjoying it, but I continued to enjoy it. And it kind of created this mentality in people's minds that RWBY will never get better as long as the people that are perceived to be the spotlight, attractors of the show, reactors, people that Rooster Teeth knows of or watch their content. I've clearly had that relationship with them briefly in the past, and people still hold on to that. And I'm villainized for it. I'm villainized for liking something, despite its flaws, despite the fact that I'm so open to watching, consuming critical content of a show that I love, because it only reinforces why I love it in the first place. But I feel like some people don't give that same type of attention. There are definitely people that are overly protective of the show, overly protective of things that can be better in the show, for people who are more critical, people that feel like good isn't good enough, that why would we want a good show when we can have a great show? And I think that falls in line too with this idea that a lot of people just put so much of their personal self into the opinions that they have about something that is so impactful in their life. So whether they attach themselves to the story, the characters, the showrunners, the creators of the show, to hear someone say something that you don't believe in, or that you don't respect, or that you don't appreciate, can be seen as an attack, can be seen as toxic, if you will. And I think there's a bit of blame to go all around for people who are just hostile towards anyone that likes the show that they once liked, that they're no longer able to enjoy. Like people telling me that they don't like the show where it is, and people like me are ruining it and preventing it from being better so they can enjoy it again. And then there are people on the other side, the toxic positivity, that no bad vibes, no criticism, nothing that can be interpreted as hate or, you know, anything that if you're not willing to accept RWBY for what it is right now, we don't want to hear it, you know, because that's not conducive to discussions and, you know, shared opinions and anything like that. Live and let live, be compassionate, and not just be willing to present your own arguments or your own perspective on things, but be willing to hear other people. I personally think technology is a little bit to blame. I constantly hear people say that RWBY, whether it's in like drama video comment or, you know, Twitter posts that I see here and there, that the RWBY community is the worst fandom on the internet. And I couldn't disagree more. I just think a big part of that is exacerbated by technology. It's exacerbated by how we communicate with each other, how we interpret other people's words in syntax and inflections when we read things, or just straight up the words that people use, because there are toxic assholes out there. And I think we need to take this to task on an individual level instead of blanketing everyone together that has less than nice things to say. You know, you can be harsh, you can be you know, you can be sugarcoaty in how you get your word across, but sometimes like some people just don't want to hear that, period. And I think that's based on the content you watch or what RWBY means to you or what you just prefer to not have in your discussions. But I think there's a little bit of knowledge that we can learn from each other, difference of opinions. I'll be the first to say it. I would not be able to tolerate this community if I only heard people say the same things that I say about the show. I love watching people who don't like the show, to be honest, or don't like a certain decision that was made, because I don't have that perspective. It's informative. It's a breath of fresh air to kind of not just hear someone say, great episode, awesome fight, good vibes, can't wait to see what happens next week. You know, variety is the spice of life. You can't have good without evil. You can't have light without darkness. You can't have, you know, I guess you can't have acceptance without critique. Because if that wasn't the case, the show wouldn't be able to go as far as it did without the people that are saying, this is good, this is how you can make it better. You know what I mean? You never want to regress, you want to progress. So, I don't really know where, you know, that's just been my general takeaway. I don't like seeing the community at each other's throats. I know I haven't been the best about doing that, you know, especially on social media. I know I call out people here and there. I know that I kind of get lost in the sauce of drama and things like that. And, you know, I also feel like I have to step it up and be a better example for others. And that's not to say that people can't make choices for themselves, but I just think that people need to be more compassionate, and I think people need to be more willing to have organic, engaging conversations about something that we all like to a degree. I know that there's nuance that gets lost in there. I know that things can get heated, especially if one side is more aggressive than the other. But that's something that we need to be better at doing, myself included. We need to be more accepting of others. We need to treat other people with respect. Remember that you're not talking to a target, you're talking to an individual. And again, technology kind of, you know, unfortunately makes us lose sight of that. So that's something that I feel is important to this project that Twiin is trying to do. I'm glad that myself and other creators are being able to kind of come together to convey this message. I don't know how well I did in conveying that message, but I just want to let you guys know that you're not alone in this. You know, the same type of nonsense that you probably deal with in a post or a forum or a comment thread or a tweet thread are things that we go through, and we want it to be better for everybody. And that's not going to work unless you guys do your due diligence to be the best version of yourselves, whether it's, you know, talking about the show or talking about individual opinions. This community is great, and I want to see it thrive and survive and strive to be the best that it can in being a welcoming, open place for everybody. And that's whether you love the show, that's whether you tolerate and accept it for what it is, and that's whether you are still sticking around because of your investment and you just want it to be better. I just think we need to be better to each other. So hopefully that happens.
That YouTuber you don't like, that Redditor who you disagree with, that person on Twitter who you want to fight, these are real people. People who have good days and bad days. people who struggle with depression and eating disorders and anxiety and abuse, people who go to therapy, who have to handle the death of loved ones, who get unfairly yelled at by some customer at their retail job. They are not some invisible, nebulous other. These things you say, you're saying to real people, not to some character, not to some brand, people. Someone could go on and on about why they hate a character in the show, but that character is fiction. Their feelings can't be hurt by those statements, because they aren't real. And yet people will go out of their way to be just as vile towards whoever spoke about their hatred for the character. People will attack other real-life people because of what they say about a CG model. And that's not okay. And you know what? People's opinions aren't binary. Someone's thoughts on a product can change over time. Someone can love one episode and then hate the very next one. No one is wholly exclusively positive or exclusively negative. People have a range of opinions on a single product. Trying to segregate the fandom into these positive/negative camps is a fallacy, because inevitably, everyone will cross that line from time to time. People change. What you see from someone on one day isn't them all the time. People are more than their mistakes, more than their bad takes.
In
terms of my experience over the years with the fandom, it's definitely been mostly positive, but I've had my fair share of less than fun times as well. Thankfully, I've had no personal attacks or any comments that have thrown at me and caused me any harm. But one moment that always stuck in my mind was as a result of one time I was on a stream with FatManFalling, Dashy Lee, Celtic Phoenix, and Vex Viewer. I can't recall exactly if it was during the stream or after it, but I remember someone saying that someone was just giving me flack for interacting with these guys. More so vexed because they're more known as part of the hatedom for a sense, because they are among the fans with maybe the most notable negative criticism being shared, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that. For one, all the guys on the stream have been very kind to me. They've respected my opinions, and in turn, I'm pretty much the same with them. I may not always agree with them, but I always respect their opinions and treat them as I would like them to treat me. And even now, we're still getting along very well, so clearly there wasn't any issue. But someone have an issue with me interacting with these guys because they themselves have issues with their opinions, that's just so strange to me, because it flew in the face of the exact reason why I started making RWBY videos in the first place, because I wanted to communicate with the community. I've been here since the very beginning of both the show and the fandom, and around Volume 2, when there was barely even a concept of RWBYtubers, I started doing episode reviews because I wanted to share my thoughts, both positive and negative, and also get a fresh perspective from everyone that I shared my opinions with. Or at the very least, interact with other fans so my enjoyment of the show wasn't just kept to myself. And while it's been such a treat to see the show and the community grow so big all over the world, adding in more creative faces and folks more than happy to share their opinions and their enjoyment of the show, it has also sadly led to seeing several people step away from interacting with the fandom because of arguments over criticism, senseless insulting over likes and dislikes, or just flat out bullying. Despite those being targeted being just as big of the fans of the show as those throwing the insults their way. But of course, that's not to say that it's all RWBY fans. Of course not. The larger a fandom grows, the more like you're gonna pick up some very toxic sorts, and I am never gonna buy into the mindset of damning the whole for the actions of the few. Especially when I've seen this same mindset, same attitude, same circumstances happening for all kinds of communities, be it anime, sports, or even worse off, in real life. I wouldn't look at an asshole fan at a sporting event and go, that is the absolute embodiment of all fans in attendance. Of course not. It's just the loud minority being especially loud in that moment, and I think anyone who does believe in that kind of mindset is only adding to the problems. It doesn't help either that RWBY fans have always had it pretty hard when it comes to dealing with how others view them in a negative light, as even early on we were getting mocked for liking the show from anime diehards, or people tearing the show and thus the fans as well a new one for the show's admittedly early flaws. Not to mention the unfortunate online climate we're in, where nowadays you don't just hate something and move on, you make roasting videos and long comment threads about why blank sucks, and as well you make yourself a troll or a bully online and you get absolutely zero punishment even if you get banned because you're hidden away behind a online persona. This difficulty at handling negativity has been especially straining in recent years for the fandom as a whole, for having to cope with the after effects of incidents born largely out of their own hands, such as the RT layoffs and crunch time, the Vic Mignogna and Ryan Hayward incidents, folks pushing false narratives about Monty's vision, misleading information, and so on. It's why I feel the root cause of many issues within the fandom towards hate and negativity and just flat out toxicity is a strong clash of toxic attacks on RWBY and its fans versus a strong toxic overprotection from the fans and a misguided effort to fight back. Many within the fandom have had to deal with so much negative energies and attitudes thrown their way that it's caused some of them to grow too defensive to anything they view as negative, even if it's not actually negative at all, or if it's not exactly a big enough issue for them to really warrant lashing out. It should be fine to say, I don't like Bumblebee's development, and be not viewed as a homophobic. You should be okay with not liking certain narrative choices without being called stupid or something much worse. Heck, it should be perfectly fine for you to be a mostly positive stance of opinion on the show and not be called an RT bootlicker. But sadly, this is the current circumstances of the back and forth of people fighting hate with hate, causing even a positivity outlook just to become a negative, and this mentality needs to stop. There's nothing gained from going on a merry-go-round of insults, accusations, and just mindless hate. And again, I started doing this gig because I wanted to share and hear other people's opinions, knowing full well that there's never going to be anyone out there I meet who has the exact same opinions that I do, and that's a good thing. I get the notion of defending your stance, especially in the face of unjust hate, and I will always appreciate those who do stand up for that. But there needs to be a better way to do it without matching it with more hate or causing infighting over nothing. We need to respect each other, even in indifference, and be the bigger man in those situations where those out there that we are clashing with are only doing so to cause strife. We need to remember that sometimes it's best to just walk away instead of continuing the conversation when it's going nowhere. And really, we just need to understand that this kind of mentality going on right now is only going to continue the cycle of hate rather than ward it off. In the end, it's just a show, not life or death. And just because others don't agree with you on a positive or negative front, it doesn't mean you have to have free reign to be as big of an asshole as those toxic sort who are only out there to spoil everyone's fun just for being a fan of an animated show. In summary, I'll just repeat this quote that I think of always in these kind of issues, so maybe someone listening will realize we need to unite in respect for each other, or at least understand there's better ways to combat hate than with equally hateful words. Otherwise, innocent people will continue to be hurt in the crossfire, and this community will be filled with both equally strong levels of joy and creativity and strong negative sorts that should be just ignored or warded out, not fought against. So, yeah, words are like swords. If you use them the wrong way, they'll become ugly weapons.
At the end of the day, the point of this video is to bring awareness to the state of the fandom these days. While everyone seems willing to acknowledge that the toxicity comes from a vocal minority, that minority seems to be becoming more and more frequent when trying to discuss the show. It's not a minority when they're the most common voice. If that quiet majority could speak up more, could demonstrate a way to interact respectfully, could get others to understand that they aren't helping anything by resorting to bully tactics, that could help a lot, because we all want to engage with this community. So many feel the need to express their thoughts and opinions about RWBY because the show matters to all of us, regardless of how positive or negative those thoughts are. And if we could just work towards allowing the opportunity for people to interact with this fandom and be able to feel safe while doing so, it could not only help fix RWBY and its fandom's reputation, but it can also help everyone involved in the community to have a much more enjoyable experience with the show. A main theme for RWBY is forgiveness, learning to understand where others come from, acknowledging that people's opinions aren't black and white. I think the community ought to start taking that to heart. Hey, I just wanted to jump in to say a huge thank you to all the other RWBYtubers who participated in this collab with me. I really appreciate it. I know you're all busy, and the fact that you took time to participate in this collab, it's really important to me, and thank you. Thank you so much for doing this, because I think it's a better product with the more voices speaking about the issue. And yeah, just thank you so much. There are going to be links in the description to everybody's channels, and so please check those out and give them your views. But yeah, thank you so much for everybody for participating in this, and I really hope that the RWBY community can be a place that people feel safe to participate in someday soon. Hopefully. I realize that this won't be an overnight change, but I would really love to have people feel like they can talk about RWBY without getting yelled at online, you know? 'Cause, you know, sometimes I sit there and think, I'd like to make another video about RWBY, I think. And it keeps stopping me, because I don't want to go back to how it was when I was making RWBY videos. The way I felt, with the way people interacted with me about it. Just because I just have opinions that they don't like, you know? So yeah, I hope that not just me, but everybody can feel safe in sharing their opinions for RWBY sooner rather than later. But yeah, thank you again to everybody who helped me with this video. You're all superheroes. And thank you as well to all my patrons. You're all super duper heroes. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you. Have a great day.
Oh, and then there are the you're just nitpicking people, the worst of the lot. You know, calling a criticism a nitpick is basically an ad hominem attack, right? Oh, it obviously bothered you enough to put it in your video, but you don't count. You're a lesser being than me who wasn't bothered by that thing. Who cares that I didn't even pay enough attention to notice it? You're worse than me for having a fuller understanding of the media you're criticizing. Where do they get off gatekeeping my goddamn opinion in the comment section of my review? And the complete lack of narrative cohesion is not a minor issue by any stretch of the imagination. You people make me sick.